So my favorite, and I'm absolutely going to send this link to him, is a gentleman that I started to work with 22 years ago. And he bought one hair care concept, one unit. He now has 13 of those and 10 massage concepts. And he just came back to me last week and said, Mark, I'm ready for number 3. And I'm going to blow the next thing out too. And he always has been full-time employed through this whole time.
Wow.
Yeah. So the guy's making a couple $1,000,000 on the side.
Welcome back to the Money Seed Podcast. My guest today is Marc Cayle. Marc is a franchise consultant and he's the owner of Fran Destiny. Marc, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Marc, tell us a little bit more about how you got into this business.
So there's a long backstory that I don't have to make very long, but right out of school, right out of college, I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I really didn't have a path. And I wound up selling group health insurance, ran into someone that was running an independent, for lack of better terms, European-style bread store in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I fell in love with the bread, loved it, and we just got along great. And one day he came to me and said, Mark, I'm going to franchise this thing. Do you want to help? I had no idea. I was like, you mean like McDonald's? Like I had no idea even what franchising was. So he was a brilliant guy, Harvard MBA, and just bootstrappy guy. And we wound up writing all the documents together, the federal disclosure documents, set up the entire franchise system together. So I really learned like School of Hard Knocks how to do this and did everything in that franchise company that you can do. I sold franchises. I helped people get started. I did layout and design for the stores. I did real estate, site selection, all that stuff. And so I went and got my franchise executive designation, certified franchise executive, to really dive in. And that's really how it got started. And then from there, we wound up in a situation where people would come in to look at the franchise, but it just wasn't a good fit for them. And it drove me crazy when they walked out the door because I was like, well, they could be a great franchisee for someone, just not for this concept. And one thing led to another. I wound up meeting the founder of a network called FranChoice. And I was the second consultant to join that concept and really, again, helped figure everything out. I mean, most of it was figured out. The founder was unbelievable, but really was early in that. And what it allowed me to do was offer more than just one concept. So fast forward to today, we have over 250 concepts that I represent. And somewhere along the way, I was approached by people that owned multiple units of an in-home care concept. And they had asked me if I could help them sell it. And I wound up falling in love with it. And because I'm during the due diligence, and I was looking at my wife going, oh my God, like this thing is for real. And my dad had passed and we had caregivers in the house when he was ill, and they lifted the weight of the world off our shoulders for a few hours every day. And I was like, if I could do this and offer that to hundreds of people, it would be just a gift like you could not believe. And on the other side of it, it was printing money. So I got excited about it. We wound up buying that business instead of helping them sell it. And I went from being a one guy employed by somebody to eventually having 250 caregivers running around and 18 administrative people over 3 offices. And we really grew it, and fell in love with franchising even more, basically, because of all the support we got and the mitigation of the risk. I just, the banks were like, oh, that's a no-brainer. They had no problem lending us the money. And so it was really one of these things where, again, School of Hard Knocks, I learned it the hard way, but just loved that model. And after about 9 years, we had a great exit. So we got a wonderful multiple. And then I was able to then do franchise consulting again full-time, which I'm doing now. And actually, my wife is a full-time consultant too. We do it together.
So tell me a little bit more about being a franchise consultant. In my mind, I'm imagining somebody wants to own a franchise, they contact you, you maybe talk to them for a while, you interview them, you get to know their interests, and then you say, hey, look, I think this kind of franchise would be perfect for you. Is that how it works? Or maybe tell us a little bit more about what you do day in, day out.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and basically that's how it works. I mean, we wind up speaking with our candidates, and they're always, not always, most of the time, they know they want to do something. They have no idea what they want to do. And there are so many franchise concepts out there that if someone just went to the internet, they'd drown in what's going on the internet about franchising. You just cannot get educated that way in an efficient way, is what I would say. So we ask to do a confidential questionnaire, and that gives us about a 50,000-foot view of the candidate and a little bit about their background, a little bit about what they've done before, their liquidity and net worth, things like that, so that we can have at least a good start. Then we set up about an hour and a half to 2 hour Zoom consultation and dive in. And when I say dive in, we get into the nitty gritty of the business attributes that make sense. So just because Mark likes to golf doesn't mean he should open a golf store, right? We need to find something for Mark that gives him the financial free availability and the availability in his schedule to go play golf, right? So that's where people go wrong most of the time is they say, oh, well, I think I should just take my hobby and do that as a business. Well, you'll never do your hobby again, for sure. And so that's just the wrong way to go about it. So we really dive in again to the attributes. What kind of employees? How many? Is it storefront? Is it retail? Is it service? Is it guys in a truck? Is it short sales cycle or is it a long sales cycle? All these different kind of things. So you really understand what makes sense for that candidate. And then I go to the inventory of franchises that we represent. I choose the ones that are basically fit the model, fit their investment range. I make sure that they're available in the area that they live, because someone could go to the internet, they can get really excited about a concept, and then it's just not available. It's sold out in their area, and they didn't know. They wasted all that time figuring all that out, right? So then I propose those concepts, and typically we look at about 3. And at that point, it's almost a full-time job doing the due diligence. And we offer all of the questions to ask the franchisor, the questions to ask the franchisees when they validate with them, and very, very strategic way to go through the due diligence so that you're making an informed decision at the end. And that's really it in a nutshell. And so I've been doing this for the franchise part, the Fran Destiny part for 24 years. And again, over 30 years in the franchise industry. And, as a franchisor, a multi-unit franchisee with an exit and a consultant. So I always say, I've been on all 3 sides of this fence and have walked the talk, right? So I've been there, done that, and really lived what I'm telling people to do. So that's really how it works.
Let's talk a little bit more about how much money is needed. I know that people have different conceptual ideas of what a franchise looks like. I mean, if I want to open a McDonald's, I might need more than $1 million. I'm sure there's other opportunities where a franchise may cost less than $100,000 to get into. But what is kind of like the minimum? What is kind of like the most affordable franchises? How much money do they cost? And what are some of the financing options available to help people overcome that?
Sure. I mean, there's a huge range of investment levels. And again, it depends on whether you're looking at a service, like, again, guys in a truck, or um, brick and mortar. There's obviously the huge difference there. I would say in the service industries, you can get in 100 and a quarter ish. Cash available, you would most likely be able to leverage 2/3 of it. So if you have 50 grand, we could look at $150,000 concept
And who would be
typically.
given the loan? Would the loan be from the bank or from the actual company, from the franchisor?
Actually, it's interesting. Some franchisors actually offer in-house financing. Otherwise, it's SBA or 401k rollover or home equity line of credit or I've got literally 3 people that moved forward this week with their own cash.
Mhm.
So it's really something that people, it's just whatever's comfortable for that person. Some people say, listen, I don't want the debt service. I want to cash this thing out. Other people say, you know what? I'd like to leverage other people's money. And that's great too. So it's really what's up to that, what's best for that person.
And you mentioned things like home equity line of credit or 401k. These are secured loans, right? So this money is fairly accessible. If someone would go to a typical bank and say, "Hey, listen, I'm starting a new business. It's a proven franchise," are banks receptive to funding those kind of businesses?
Yes. And previously, I think the SBA registry was kind of taken off the shelf a couple of years ago, but the SBA did have a registry with franchisors that were great at paying, with franchisees that were great at paying back the loans, right? So they were more apt to lend on those. I can tell you when we did ours, I mean, I'm a relatively transparent guy. I don't care who knows what about what we did, but it was about a $1.3 million investment for the resale that we did. And I did it with $5,000 of my own money because I knew at that point that there was enough cash flow to cover the debt service. And I had no issues because I knew that we were going to blow that business up. And we actually did. We quintupled the business. And so we had no issues getting the money. And back then, you could do it like that. No, it was all before Sarbanes. It was all before everything, right? So the banks were like, "Yeah, sure. If the business could support the debt service, we're in." And I'm like, "It can." They were like, "Great." So we did that. And some people would look at me cross-eyed, saying, "You are out of your mind," right? Because we were really leveraged. But I had zero issues with it because the company was pumping out cash, and I knew that it was going to be okay, and it was.
Tell me a little bit more about the typical client. And what I mean by a typical client is, how old is the person who approaches you for the first time? What do their finances look like? And what are some of the telltale signs right off the bat that you look for? Like, yeah, this person has what it takes to be successful, or what, this person just does not have the right expectations.
Yeah, I work with people from all walks of life. My wife and I are actually helping my daughter's best friend. He's 25 years old. His parents will help co-sign and things like that, but he's going to come to the table with a chunk of the franchise fee on his own. So that's one example where we're working with sometimes kids. And I'm working with another gentleman. He's not even 30. He opened his own independent gym, um, and then wound up a gentleman that I placed who now has 22 franchised units that I helped him build, get into. He works out at this kid's gym. So he was talking to him. He said, well, maybe you should talk to Mark because if you're looking to expand, you should look into franchising because it's going to be much easier for you to do. It took this kid 3-4 years just to get it together with his independent gym. So he actually just signed yesterday for a boutique men's health business. And it's a perfect bolt on to what he's doing because most of the guys that go to his gym need what this company does, right? So that was a no-brainer. He's doing it in cash. Really, he was a bootstrap guy and was able to do it. I'm working, and I'm just giving you pure examples because I'm actually working with a whole bunch of different people from all over the place right now. A very sophisticated couple in suburban Chicago. The wife is a C-suite person at a bank, and the husband he trades on the floor, and they are very well heeled. And they're doing a 3 units of a concept that we found for them, and they're thrilled. So it's a husband wife, it's someone's kid, it's someone that's been able to figure it out enough to have enough cash to put away to do it. And I think the oldest person we've ever worked with was in their 70s. They were
That's
literally just kind
incredible.
of like, I'm bored, I need to do something.
I love it.
And so
I think it's really powerful that you mentioned that there are some people in their early to mid 20s who are getting into franchising, because I still have a W-2, but I've started a few businesses, throughout the years. I can tell you that running a business is not easy, right? You have to all of a sudden become an expert in a lot of different things, not, from customer service to bookkeeping to advertising. You have to be responsive. You got to respond to phone calls and voicemails, right? Like there's a lot of different skills you got to pick up right away. So do you think that somebody in their early to mid 20s can pick up all those and run a franchise successfully?
So interesting question, and I appreciate that question because, you know, franchising offers the ability to leverage the franchisor's team of experts that help you do all that stuff, right? So that's one of the biggest advantages of being in a franchise system is that you don't have to be an expert on everything. There's business coaches that will be meeting with you at least monthly. There's field support people that come out to your location relatively regularly. And the franchisor is a call away. If I have a problem with my P&Ls and it looks out of whack, I just call my business coach that the franchisor provides, and they'll help me straighten it out immediately. I was in a situation, even on the HR side. I mean, that business is a pure HR play with the in-home care agency because you're hiring people every day, basically. I wasn't. We set it up so that we were semi-absentee, but my team had to do that on a daily basis. But I was put in a situation where I had to let one of the relatively key people go that were with the old regime when I bought the business. And I was not that guy. I was mortified that what was this person going to do? And I was more emotional about it than I should have been. And I called the franchisor. They literally sent the franchise business coach to my office, sat in my office with me, and helped me let this person go. Made sure I didn't say anything stupid, that I was in compliance with all the HR rules and all that stuff. And without that, I would have absolutely said something stupid without question because I didn't know and I wasn't expected to know. And that's the beauty of franchising to begin with, is that the franchise fee, the upfront fee, gets you into that business. And I call that success insurance, and gets you there faster. So for instance, this guy with the gym, he said afterwards, after researching the boutique health concept, said, boy, do I wish I would have just gone with a franchise to begin with my gym, because I would have been light years ahead of where I am right now. And so, there's a lot of facets to that business that you just don't have to be an expert on. And that's the beauty of it.
Tell me a little bit more. You mentioned this acronym earlier, or this certification. I think you called it a franchise executive or certified franchise executive, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm kind of new to it. Tell me a little bit more. What does that designation entail?
So that is offered through the International Franchise Association, and it's a bunch of different courses that you need to take. Um, and by the time you're done taking them, and that's everything from the logistics of franchising to the laws to the what you can say and what you can't say during a franchise sales process. I went to a lot of things about real estate because at that time I was with a franchisor that's what we did. We had to do real estate, and I learned so much. It was like getting a mini MBA. And so someone with that certification has, again, been through additional quote unquote training and education that I believe is really important when you're dealing with things. I mean, we're talking about an industry that is really regulated by the FTC. And if you zig instead of zag, especially if you're on a sales team, a development team of a franchisor, we're talking about the biggest litigious situation you could be in, right? If you say the wrong thing, you cannot promise anything about earnings. You cannot promise, all these kind of things. And so it was a really, really interesting thing to get. And I was very proud to be able to do that. And additionally, the gentleman that I was working with at the bread concept, we went to Minnesota. I think it was at Carleton College. They had literally a franchise mini MBA program. And we were there for, I don't know how many days it was, but we did that too. So it's just really been, you can't know enough. And there's unfortunately a lot of people in this industry that don't know enough. And some of them don't know anything about franchising, and they think that they can help people do it because they took a class one day and or online or whatever they did, and that I you just need to run the other direction when that happens.
And is that a requirement? Is that certification a requirement to be a franchise consultant?
It is not. It is not.
That's good to know.
I
So
think
not
it
every, so
should
not
be.
every, yeah, so not every franchise consultant has this certification that you
No,
have.
no.
Tell me a little bit more about the timing from the time that someone first starts working with you to the time that you identify the market and the right franchise, that they might be interested in. And how long does it take for that person to actually, from the time they start working with you to the time that their business is up and running? What does that look like?
Another interesting question. How long do you think it should take?
I'm guessing, from the time you identify the market, the company, you set up, your LLCs, you get your permits, you work with a franchisee together, 3, 4 months minimum, maybe more. I mean, I'm guessing, but
Okay. It's interesting because there's a couple of different timelines, right? So there's the identifying whether you're a good fit for franchising to begin with, right? And what concepts make sense for you. That's one timeline. And I would say that is call it a week, right? By the time we do the questionnaire, then get on the call for the consultation, and then I have concepts for you to see week and a half, right? Then there's the due diligence timeline. And some people say, "Oh, well, I would assume it's going to take about 6 months." Nothing takes 6 months if you're diligent about it, right? And better yet, if you have a very good system to follow that is efficient, it shouldn't take that long. The process that I use you can absolutely identify the franchise that you want to be in 4 to 6 weeks. So that's the due diligence timeline, is 4 to 6 weeks. Then once you sign and wire money and do all that and become the franchisee, then there's training, pre-opening training and training. And then if there's real estate, that could take months, right? And then so it really depends on whether you're doing it in, a storefront or a service, that kind of thing. But from meeting with me the first time to understanding which franchise is the best fit, that's 4 to 6 weeks. I just had someone do it. They got so excited, and it was absolutely the perfect fit, and everything came in together from the first time, from the day I introduced them to the franchisor to the day they made the decision was 2.5 weeks.
amazing. That's pretty quick.
Very quick,
Yeah.
but we provide the roadmap to get to that point, right? So if you're wondering what questions to ask and you have got to do all that research, well, I'm handing you those questions, right? And I'm talking to the franchisor. We have weekly calls with my candidates where I know what the franchisor's has said because I talk to them all the time as well. And then if they have things that the franchisee or the prospective franchisee didn't do, whether it's homework or whatever, I'm calling that candidate and I'm saying, listen, I know the franchisor sent you X, Y, and Z. It's a link to a video that you should have watched. They know you didn't watch it because you never clicked on it, and they know when you click on it, right? So I'm on them, and my job is just to make sure that the locomotive keeps on going down the track, right? And whether that locomotive stops along the way, great, that's fine. We can always pivot. We can do whatever you want, but ultimately, it's about getting the due diligence done in a timely and efficient manner so that you can get down to business and get moving, right?
And Mark, are you compensated by the franchisor, the franchisee, or both?
So I am a free service to the candidates I work with because if they do move forward with the franchise, or I get what I would call a finder's fee. It's like working with a real estate broker.
Hmm. So tell me right now, what are some of the industries that are hot in the franchise world, right? Because a lot of people, they hear the word franchise, they think it's like some kind of a fast food joint, but in reality, it's a lot more than that. Yeah, I know you mentioned home care services earlier. What's really hot right now what are some of the franchises you really like?
Yeah, it's interesting. About 98% of the people that come to me automatically are thinking food. Until we go through the process of what are the attributes that are appealing to them, and it's never food. like ever. In the 24 years that I've been doing this, I've placed food maybe twice. Maybe. I don't even know if I've placed it twice. It has the worst attributes of any concept in the world. And if we could spend, that's a whole nother show. Well, we could talk about that. I would say that the hot concepts are what is recession resistant, what is Amazon resistant, and what is pandemic resistant, which I never had to talk about before, obviously. So we are talking about anything that has to do with kids, anything that has to do with seniors, and anything that has to do with pets. Because you are not going to scrimp and pinch on any one of those things. Right. And so those are my go-tos typically. And then beyond that, you have boutique beauty that's always going to be hot. Med spas are hot right now. Anything wellness and fitness is hot. But we make sure to stay away from trends and fads. And it's really important to understand that up front that, I'm not going to try to pick on any in particular business, but there are plenty out there, and you would easily identify what's a fad, what's going to be around in 10 years. These are 10-year agreements, right? When you're signing a franchise agreement, you need to have that forward thinking. Now, anytime along that 10 years, you can sell that business. It's your business, right? But if it was me, I would want something. Listen, 10,000 people turn 75 every day. Every day,
75. Wow. Okay.
right?
That's wild.
So, and since COVID, the pet population has ballooned like you cannot believe what is going on in that industry. And now you've got people getting forced back into an office. Well, what are they going to do with their dog? Right? So, and kids as kids. I mean, everyone's having kids. They're never going to stop having kids. And there are so many things for kids that make sense, whether that's enrichment, whether that's education, whether that's sports related things, whether that, you name it, it, you know, kids are, it's a no brainer. So I think those three sectors are really where I would concentrate. But listen, there's so many cool things out there. I learn about couple of new things probably every quarter that I'm like, I mean, there people become consultants and then get caught up in just buying all the concepts that they like. I have a buddy who's a consultant. He owns like 4 or 5 concepts because he gets excited, and he doesn't say no to shiny things. And he's doing really well. Don't get me wrong, but it's like, man, can't you just like concentrate on something? But he's obviously has a formula and he's doing fine. But it's interesting.
What is that? This is the first time I'm hearing about the 10-year commitment. What does that mean exactly?
So the franchise agreements are typically a 10-year agreement. So from the date it's signed, you have to renew, if you do want to renew, on your 10th year and sign the then current franchise agreement, right? And along the way, that franchise agreement is going to change. Fees might go up. There might be different vendor opportunities, whatever it might be, but you are obligated to your franchise agreement that you signed, right? And so again, along the way, we were almost at our 10-year, and I would have renewed because we were having a blast, and we set it up so that we were working on it instead of in it, which is very important in that concept because ultimately, I wasn't walking into someone's house and wiping butts. This just wasn't what I was going to do. So we surrounded ourselves with people that we had a general manager, we had managers at each unit, we had those layers in place so that ultimately I wasn't getting any after hours phone calls, period. And so if you set those businesses up right, that's certainly something that can happen. So anyway, there's a million ways to skin this, and it's just it just comes down to, you need to know. I always say you just need to know thyself. Are you a good fit for franchising to begin with? We help you figure that out. And can you follow a system? Can you stay within the parameters of the rules, right? If I'm talking to someone and within 20 minutes, all they're saying is, well, I would just do it myself, or, I hate following rules and they're never going to tell me what to do. Well, you're not the right person for a franchise, right? So then it's a very short conversation at that point. But that happens every once in a while.
When somebody wants to exit the business, you mentioned that even if you don't want to wait the 10 years, if it's successful, you can probably sell it. There's probably somebody else who will buy a going concern, right? Because you have proven cash flows, etc. How are they typically valued? Is it just a multiple, like an income multiple or a revenue multiple? And how good is the market for existing franchises?
So franchises are typically, they get a higher multiple than independent businesses because the incoming buyer knows that there's support there and systems set up and everything's ready to go, right? And operations manuals and everything else. It is typically either a multiple of revenue or a one-time gross sales or whatever it might be, depending on the industry. It depends. The interesting thing, though, is there might be averages in an industry, but if you set it up again where you're working on it instead of in it, where the incoming buyer doesn't have to worry about Marc Cayle selling his business and he is the face of that business. So all the referral sources and all of the vendors and everyone they're used to just Marc. That's a problem. And so what we did, the way we set it up was, again, we had these layers of management that were going to stay on. It was a turnkey deal, and I got a higher multiple than normal for selling that business because I had it layered with management and it wasn't dependent on me to run the day-to-day business.
You've mentioned you've helped hundreds of people find the right franchise. Typically, if there's such a thing as a success rate, and I'm thinking like maybe instead of looking at like a success rate, what is the failure rate? Like how often do you have a client who comes in, they're very excited, they get matched up with a franchise, they work really hard, they do everything well, but it just doesn't work out. Like it just doesn't land well in the market, the thing doesn't cash flow, there's no income, and they just kind of give up after a few years and it's not successful. What is that failure rate?
So failure rate in franchising in general is about 10%. Is the general failure rate for franchising. Now, there are subcategories of franchising, like there's more food that fails than others because food fails more often anyway, for many different reasons. And so I would say that my job is to make sure that the match is right, because there's two major reasons for failure in franchising. Bad match, meaning someone thought they liked to golf, so they should open a golf store, and they wound up counting golf clubs all day, and they hated every day, and they just hated it, right? So that's one reason why they would fail. They're miserable. They don't want to get out of bed in the morning because of that, right? And the other thing is undercapitalization. So I always tell people that you need to have 12 to 18 months worth of living expenses, right down to that movie that you want to go to and shoes for your kids' feet and whatever else you're spending on monthly. 12 to 18 months set aside in a separate account, because if you start that business and need to bleed that business to death because you need to live out of it, you're going to fail. You need to reinvest that money back into growing that business and marketing and the right people and everything else. And if you're using that money to live on, that's the biggest mistake people make. And that's a huge reason for failure. So best fit, proper capitalization can resolve most of the failure issues. Ultimately, the failure rates outside of franchising are much, much, much higher. And it just mitigates risk to go with a franchise. And so that's why. So I'm not positive you're asking me what my success rate is, but I can tell you that I would easily say the majority of the people that I've placed have either been rookie of the year or franchisee of the year of their concepts, because we have known that what their perfect match is. And ultimately, it's a decision that you make with your head, not your heart. Because if you are looking for a cash flowing, awesome business with great margins, I can tell you it's not going to be sexy. It might be those dirty jobs that no one wants to do. So you don't have to have my feeling is you don't have to have this passion for it. The business is ultimately a widget that's going to get you to the place where you want to go. It's the vehicle that's getting you there, right? Of course, if you hate it, you're not going to do it. But eventually what happens is I can introduce people to things, and it's always, I'll show them things that they never would have thought of in a million years on their own. And once they start digging in, they're like, oh, yeah, my preconceived notions about this were not right. And so the most important thing coming into a process like this is leave the preconceived notions aside, get the head trash out of your head. Don't listen to your Uncle Jim, who had a neighbor who had a cousin's fiance's brother who had a bad experience with a painting concept once 30 years ago, right? That stuff has to be set aside so that you can make an informed decision based on what's good for you, not what's good for someone at the Thanksgiving table who thinks they know what you're talking about.
Well said. And I just want to say that the 10% you quoted, I mean, that's amazing, right? Because I think most businesses, something like 80% or 90% of businesses typically fail in the first 5 years. So the fact that, you only have a 10% failure rate in general, like in franchising in general, I think that's phenomenal. That's a really good, yeah, that's compelling.
And those success rates are published right in the federal disclosure documents of these concepts. And those are public documents. So if you are introduced to a franchise, the first thing you can go to is their earnings claims, which is the item 19 of the 23 of the document. And they also have closures. And you could do the math pretty damn quickly to know if it's over 10 or 15% failure rate, I wouldn't do it. Period.
Let's finish off on a positive note here, Mark. Tell me about some of the success stories of your clients. Tell me some really amazing stories. Somebody came to you and now they have this empire of franchises and they're just doing amazing.
So my favorite, and I'm absolutely going to send this link to him, is a gentleman that I started to work with 22 years ago. And he bought one hair care concept, one unit. He now has 13 of those and 10 massage concepts. And he just came back to me last week and said, Mark, I'm ready for number 3. And I'm going to blow the next thing out too. And he always has been full-time employed through this whole time.
Wow.
Yeah. So the guy's making a couple $1,000,000 on the side, has a full infrastructure set up so that when we do the next concept together, he'll be able to use a lot of his existing employees, especially on the administrative side. He's just got it built. So the other wonderful thing about him is that he consistently refers his friends to me. And it's really funny because I think we've done 3 or 4 placements literally on his same block where he lives. So his neighbors have all done this. So we want to rename his street Franchise Row. And he sent me the young guy with the gym. He just sent me 3 of his friends. One of them he went to college with. C-suite guys like at NVIDIA and Apple. And the third guy's already retired. They're all in their 40s. And they just did a gigantic placement out in California. So a lot of my interactions with these people results in them building a nice business. And so they're comfortable enough referring their friends and family to me, which is the biggest compliment you can get. And I just love that side. So he's like my ultimate favorite. And then I love working with the younger folks. I worked years ago with a kid who was still living with his mom. And we placed him in this concept. He was rookie of the year. He's been the number 1 franchisee in that system for 12 years running. He now has multiple territories of that. He's launching, and it's interesting because he's actually launching a a manufacturing facility that will manufacture the product that the franchisor sells. So he's now vertically integrating his business with the franchisor's blessing. And he, like I said, he was living with his mother when I met him. He ain't living with his mother anymore. I think he bought his mom a really nice house not too long ago. So, I mean, these are things where to have the understanding that I'm not only impacting the lives of the people that I work with, but all of their employees, all of their vendors, it's the ripple effect goes on and on and on with a franchise, that it's not just the franchisee that is benefiting from the business. It's everyone around him that he's hiring and employing and buying from and everything else. So that's the real exciting part.
All right, Mark, tell us, where can people reach out to you?
So the website is frandestiny.com. So frandestiny.com. And for this show, there's a special landing page, frandestiny.com/seed. And on that page, you'll see on the bottom, there's 3 different boxes that you can choose from to get additional information about franchising. And there's a wealth of information on the website for Fran Destiny.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much for your time today, Mark, and have
Thank
a
you.
great rest of your day.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Money Seed Podcast. Please remember to click like and subscribe. It really helps spread the message to other investors, and it helps attract new viewers to the show. We appreciate your support. Thanks very much.